Exes. What's the worst karma you've seen? Hit the person who betrayed you? Story 1. I got invited to my ex's wedding because we're all adults now. He'd cheated on me with his coworker, then turned their office fling into a fairy tale romance, hashtag and all. I went because his sister, still my friend, begged me. The venue had a giant screen over the dance floor running a live social wall that auto-pulled posts from the wedding hashtag. During the speeches, the DJ cued a slideshow of their journey. Beach selfies, latte art, ring close-ups. Then the screen hiccuped and started cycling new posts the guests were adding in real time. A boomerang of clinking glasses, a blurry group dance, and then silence. An upload stamped 8:41 p.m. The bride in that exact dress, in the venue's upstairs hallway, pressed against the event planner. The angle was unmistakable. The caption from a burner account said only, "Same tricks, new vows." People gasped. Someone dropped a champagne flute. My ex shouted at the DJ to shut it down, but not before the wall refreshed. Another clip from earlier that afternoon. Her in the dressing suite, kissing the planner and laughing. "He'll never notice. He never notices anything." The planner vanished. The bride tried to grab the mic and spin it. Stressed, cold feet. "Just a joke." But his sister stepped up and said, voice shaking, "You begged Max to come for closure. Maybe you needed it too." Half the guests streamed outside for air. The groom's mom asked me if I was okay. I realized I was. I left before the fight started, but the next morning the hashtag was full of apology statements and a statement from the venue. The social wall had only pulled what was tagged by attendees. The burner account? It was the bride's co-worker. Apparently the planner wasn't the only work husband. The marriage was annulled in 23 days. The hashtag is still up. The last post is a photo of the empty dance floor with the caption, "He finally noticed." Story 2. I was 14 when my dad, my betrayer, tried to make me a prop. He'd cheated, moved out, and spent a year posting super dad content while telling the court mom was alienating me. He told me to say I felt unsafe at mom's because judges care about feelings. He rehearsed it with cue cards. Court day, I sat behind him. Mom's lawyer started calm and surgical. Screenshots of dad's broke because of child support captions. Then bank statements mom subpoenaed after a tip. His side gig wasn't tutoring. It was a cash-heavy consulting scheme he ran through his girlfriend's Etsy shop with payments labeled as gifts. The judge raised an eyebrow. Then the bailiff brought in the person who gave the tip, my dad's girlfriend, mascara streaked, holding an iPad. She'd thought they were in love. Then she found messages where he called her a placeholder. She turned over spreadsheets, Venmos, DMs with instructions on how to list income as craft income to dodge support. And then, because my dad had betrayed her too, she handed me a small notebook. "You should decide," she whispered. The judge asked if I wanted to speak. My hands shook, but I read. Not about mom, about the note dad had written me to memorize. The judge's face changed when I read, "If they ask where you want to live, say mom cries too much and I'm calmer." I said, "He told me to lie." I put the notebook on the rail. "And I want the lying to stop." Custody flipped. Supervised visits. Back support recalculated with penalties. The court ordered him to remove my photos from social media unless I signed consent. Outside, he hissed that I'd ruined him. I told him I hadn't. He did that by making me his script. I haven't seen his face on Instagram since. The last thing he posted before he wiped it all? A blank square with the caption, "Taking accountability." For once, he didn't tag me. Story 3. I worked in compliance when my teammate, my ex's rebound, ironically, joined marketing and started dating my ex a month after my ex dumped me. Office soap opera, whatever. But then my ex claimed I was toxic and got me moved off a flagship account. He took the lead, paraded around with the VP, and posted a selfie captioned, "When merit wins." A quarter later, expense reports started smelling wrong. Duplicate ride receipts with altered timestamps, client meals at the same bar where he and the VP were always perched, and a suspicious external email. A deck from our prospect mysteriously matched one my ex had on his desktop, down to the typos. Our team uses a versioning system with invisible hashes. I pulled the logs. Someone had exported my old template, scrubbed my name, and pitched it to the competitor first, then to our client. I filed a quiet audit. Security imaged devices. The day the walls closed in just happened to be the day the VP announced my ex's promotion. HR entered the all hands with 2 badges. The head of legal read out a line I'd written in the report. The perpetrator relied on emotional proximity to leadership to evade standard controls. My ex tried to pivot to tears and say he'd been set up by a bitter ex. Legal clicked a slide. Metadata trails. Venmo notes to a friend for fake rideshare reimbursements, and an email my ex had sent himself from my old folder titled Rename to Draft. The VP stared at her hands. Security escorted them both out. Later, the CEO called me into a small conference room with a window that looked like freedom. "We didn't protect you," he said. "We will now." They gave me the account back with a raise. I went home and opened a message from a stranger. The VP's husband. He thanked me for pulling the splinter. Attached was a photo of a packed suitcase and a sticky note that said, "Merit wins." For once, it did. Story 4. My ex stole my grandmother's ring. We were broke, engaged, and he said pawn shops were just a temporary bridge. He promised he'd buy it back. A month later, he moved out. No ring, no goodbye. My grandmother died that winter, and at the funeral luncheon, my aunt announced a small will reading for the immediate family. I stayed to help stack chairs. Auntie waved me in anyway. "She asked for you to be present," she said. The lawyer unfolded a letter in my grandmother's wobbly cursive. "To my girl, the ring has always been a test. A circle returns to itself." Then he unlocked a tablet. My grandmother, God love her, had installed a $30 camera pointing at her jewelry box after a neighbor's aide was suspected of snooping. We watched a time-stamped video from the night the ring vanished. My ex, slipping into her room after Thanksgiving pie, whispering, "I'll bring it back, promise." He held his phone up, clear as day, texting someone. Got the collateral. The next clip. The pawn ticket. He'd taken a photo of it, probably to prove to his buyer he'd deliver. The shop owner, subpoenaed quietly by my aunt, had already confirmed the sale and the name of the person who bought it. My ex's mother. She thought she was rescuing the heirloom for him to repropose with later. Grandma anticipated it all. Her addendum transferred the ring, not its appraisal value, the ring itself, to me. The lawyer turned to my ex, who'd shown up late smelling like apologies. "Return it," he said, "or your mother will be charged with receiving stolen property." He laughed, said it was just a ring. My aunt slid a small box across the table. Inside, the ring, reset with the original diamond. "She bought it back herself," Auntie said, "in case you failed the test." The will left me the house key on a ribbon. My ex reached out for the ring, and my aunt snapped the box shut. "A circle returns to itself," she repeated. My ex left with nothing but his smirk. He texted me that night. "We can still talk." I sent him the video clip. Read receipts on. No reply. Story 5. I'm the other woman, except I didn't know I was. He said they were on a break, showed me screenshots of fights, and a draft separation agreement with dates conveniently blurred. He moved into my apartment fast, too fast, and left for closure weekends that smelled like her perfume. When I found the intact wedding photos tucked in his gym bag, I messaged her. I expected rage. She wrote, "Come over." I brought tea and shaking hands. We compared timelines. He'd proposed to me with a ring that still had a receipt folded under the cushion of the box. Dated 2 months before he told her he needed space. She showed me a group chat of neighbors in their townhouse complex. Videos of him at 2 a.m., scratching her car, unscrewing her porch light, and a proud little clip of him slipping a note under her door. Move out or else. The neighbors had been collecting evidence for the HOA because some men only learn when the village speaks. We went to the police together. I handed over his burner accounts. She handed over a restraining order draft. The detective looked tired and grateful. The arrest came on a Tuesday. He texted me, running late, while he was in the back of a squad car. The HOA circulated a statement to the complex group chat, reminding residents not to engage. Someone posted a GIF of a raccoon caught in a trash bin. Petty, but it felt like oxygen. Eviction followed. My lease manager accepted my documentation and let me break the contract without penalty. He tried to crash at my place one last time, pounding the door and crying that we're soulmates. I slid his ring box through the mail slot. He didn't know I'd swapped the ring for the receipt. When he finally opened it in the hallway, the paper fell into his hands. Date circled in red, and a sticky note from me. You betray in drafts, we heal in finals. The next week, his own brother DM'd both of us. A long apology, screenshots of years of similar stunts, and a photo of the car he'd keyed when they were teenagers. He's been writing the same story forever, the brother wrote. Thanks for helping end the series. Story 6. My ex loved performing grief. He cheated, emptied our joint savings to invest in his startup, and when I left, he announced on Facebook that I'd abandoned him during a difficult time. Then, my mentor, our mutual friend, the one whose Rolodex he pillaged, died. The service overflowed the small-town chapel. They set up a live stream for the hundreds who couldn't fit. My ex insisted on giving a eulogy. Of course he did. He wore black like a costume and said our mentor believed in second chances, glancing at me in the front pew. letting the implication hang. Halfway through, the pastor's tablet dinged. He frowned, whispered to the AV guy, and asked everyone to sit. "Our friend scheduled something," he said, voice trembling. On the projector, an email opened. Time delayed for after his death. It was gentle, like him. He spoke to the camera from a hospital chair, oxygen line in his nose, and smiled. "If you're seeing this, I'm gone," he began. "There's a file I want played only if certain people try to make my death about themselves." The next video was a screen recording. My ex on a Zoom late at night, convincing a junior dev to send him a prototype before IP paperwork was signed. "Don't loop in the lawyer," he said. "We'll surprise her." Another clip. Him bragging on a call about ghosting investors who asked for accountability. The last, a voice memo he'd left our mentor when the scheme started to collapse. Teary. Promising to repay everything if our mentor would tell me to come back. "Say it's my anxiety," he asked. "You know how she listens to you." The chapel air went cold. The pastor closed the tablet and, without drama, read our mentor's last paragraph. "Forgiveness isn't pretending harm didn't happen. It's telling the truth and letting people choose their distance." The live stream chat exploded with coworkers typing, "I knew it." That timestamp. "So that's why legal stalled." My ex tried to stand and sputter about context. But the widow, who had never raised her voice, turned to him and said, "Not today." Later, the nonprofit my mentor chaired issued a statement. They were filing civil claims to recover stolen assets from the startup. I watched my ex walk down the steps alone, shaking. No audience left. The last thing my mentor wrote, displayed on the screen as the organ began, "The measure of a eulogy is how little you need to say about yourself." It was the quietest thunderclap I've ever heard. Story 7. I groom dogs for a living, which means I see a lot of breakups through leashes. My ex left me for a travel influencer with a drone and an affiliate code. He also left our dog, Taco, with me temporarily while he got settled. Weeks turned into months. Taco went from anxious to joyful, from hiding under the bed to doing zoomies in the hallway at 6 a.m. Then my ex texted, "New apartment allows pets. I'll pick him up Friday legally." The microchip still had his name. That same week, our city shelter ran a Clear the Kennels event, and I volunteered to do free baths for dogs awaiting adoption. A local reporter filmed a segment. Taco and I photobombed in the background, him in a ridiculous sunflower bandana. The clip went viral, not because of Taco, but because the reporter included a quiet montage of empty cages as dogs went home. The next day, the shelter posted a follow-up. Donations poured in, and they were using the funds to start a microchip update clinic. Free paperwork help to protect pets from being reclaimed after abandonment. Friday, my ex showed with a new girlfriend and a ring light. He tried to shove past me to grab Taco's leash. I asked him for proof of vet visits from the last year. He rolled his eyes because he didn't have any. The shelter director stepped out from the back. She recognized him. Turns out he'd tried to surrender Taco there 6 months ago when I was at work. The intake volunteer had scanned the chip, saw my emergency contact, and called me. His signature sat in their system like a landmine. He started yelling about my dog until a volunteer, an attorney moonlighting with a lint roller, explained that surrender forms plus abandonment under our ordinance meant he couldn't just walk in and reassert ownership because a TikTok apartment said so. He threatened to call the cops. The director said, "Please do. We'll show them the footage from the day you filmed Taco crying in your car for clicks." He left swearing he'd ruin the shelter. Instead, the reporter did a second piece, how to legally protect your pet from an ex. The microchip clinic doubled in size. Taco? He climbed into my lap during the interview and slept through my tears. 2 months later, he became the shelter's unofficial mascot, visiting on Saturdays to sit next to shy dogs so adopters could see what calm looks like. When my ex tried one more time, showed up at the park with treats, Taco sniffed his hand, turned his head, and trotted back to me, sunflower bandana fluttering. That was the only decision that mattered. Story 8. My ex ran a mid-tier streaming channel built on mental health advocacy and authenticity. He cheated like it was cardio and told me when I found DMs that parasocial boundaries didn't apply to him because artists love. He also ran charity streams for mental health orgs, waving giant novelty checks while never once posting receipts. After we split, I stayed modded because I wanted a paper trail. Another mod, quiet, relentless, started saving everything. Streamlabs exports, PayPal notes, the exact timestamps where he'd switch donation links midstream to an alt email for easier tracking. During his 72-hour subathon, the overlay glitched. A widget meant to show top donors briefly flashed the back-end dashboard, his alt address, and a list of withdrawals labeled transfer to primary. Chat noticed. He panicked, switched scenes, blamed trolls. The quiet mod dropped a paste bin in the Discord. Every donation supposedly for charity that had landed in the alt matched to bank deposits within 24 hours. We pinged the charity he always named. Their social manager responded in the replies, "We have never received funds from this creator." Sponsors ghosted in real time. He tried crying. He said he'd been fronting the costs of advocacy. What costs? That he intended to donate. When? That I had poisoned the mod team. We were fine, thanks. Then the charity posted a thread tagging the platform's integrity team. The platform, publicly for once, replied, "We're investigating." That didn't happen without receipts. We had them. The purge was swift. Channel demonetized, payouts frozen, a refund wave hit. The alt couldn't cover it, so the platform ate the loss and sent him a bill. He went live on an obscure site 2 weeks later to 14 viewers. The quiet mod and I watched for 5 minutes, then closed the tab. He called me at 3 a.m., drunk, saying I'd ruined his purpose. I said, "Your purpose was keeping the lights on with other people's grief." The charity sent the mod team a private note thanking us. They attached a photo of new wellness kits they'd funded with surge donations after the scandal. Journals, hotline cards, actual help. I printed it and taped it to my wall. I'm not proud of how much I stared at the view count on his return stream, but I did. You don't always get to see a mask rot. This time, the camera stayed on. Story 9. I work at the county recorder's office. It's unglamorous until it isn't. A woman came in pale as drywall with a quitclaim deed she'd found wedged behind her stove. Her ex had filed it, transferring half their house to a shell LLC 2 weeks before he vanished with a coworker. He'd forged her signature using a rental application she'd emailed him years ago. She was terrified she'd lose the home she'd bought long before him. Fraud cases crawl, but sometimes the universe likes a sprint. The morning I started pulling parcel history, a title company courier dropped off a stack for an entirely different transaction. Right on top was a loan application from the same shell LLC, using the transferred property as collateral for a hard money refinance. The notary stamp looked tired. I called the notary. She remembered the guy. Too cologne, too loud, in a hurry. She also remembered asking for the spouse's ID and being told, "She's at work, I'll bring it later." She never saw it. We flagged the transfer, logged a suspected forgery, and froze the recording. The hard money lender called, furious, until our counsel invited them to meet the forged signature in person with a deputy present. The deputy liked the case. He liked it enough to loop in the DA. While they built a file, the ex, blissfully ignorant, kept paying an appraiser and contractor deposits on a house he no longer controlled. When the DA's office finally served him, he posted a story about haters who can't stand to see a man hustle. The comments were mostly bots. On auction day for a different property he'd leveraged, I saw her again. Less pale now, holding a pre-approval letter. She was buying a tiny duplex 2 streets over to rent half and cover her mortgage. She told me she'd taken a first-time landlord class the library offers on Tuesdays. The ex showed up in a cheap suit to bid on a foreclosure and got outgunned by 3 real investors. He tried to smirk at her. She looked past him and raised her hand at the next lot. 6 months later, a holiday card arrived at our office addressed to the clerks who stopped a disaster. It was a photo of her on the porch with a rooms available chalkboard sign and a tomato plant in a bucket. On the back, she'd written, "He wanted me homeless. I ended up with keys." The DA's case is still crawling, but some verdicts land early. He moved into a basement suite with mildew and a window the size of a postcard. One of hers. Story 10. My brother is the betrayer in this story, and I wish he wasn't. He cheated on his wife, my best friend, and insisted her son wasn't his. He said it in group chats, at barbecues to our mother. He refused child support and told anyone who would listen that he'd been trapped. He demanded a DNA test, got it, and when it came back 99.99% his, he posted a meme about system errors and refused to delete it. The boy, Eli, learned to read facial expressions before he learned to read. Then I got sick. It went from weird bruises to we're starting chemo in a week. They typed my blood, went through the registry, and found nothing. The doctor asked as gently as possible if we could test family. My brother swabbed reluctantly, muttering about needles. Eli volunteered without a sound. He was 9. He was a match. Not perfect, but enough to try. We sat in a small room with cartoon whales on the wall and a very serious nurse who explained peripheral blood stem cell donation to a 4th grader. "It will make you tired," she said. He nodded like a soldier. My brother tried to speak for him. "Well, think about it." And Eli said, clear as bells, I already did. Hospital policy requires consent from a legal guardian. On paper, that was my brother. For the first time in years, he said the quiet truth out loud. I'm his father. He signed. The procedure was long and strange. Eli played Minecraft between blood draws, then fell asleep clutching a half-eaten graham cracker. When it was over, he woke up and asked if my hair would come back curly. My brother stood by the vending machines and cried like a thief who finally saw the ledger. He posted nothing that day. He took down the memes the next. He asked his ex, Eli's mom, if he could talk to their son about being a match. She said not yet. Eli beat her to it. He walked into the kitchen holding the consent form and said, I matched for Auntie. I didn't do it for you. Transplants are not magic. I still did chemo. I still counted the tiles on the ceiling and tried not to bargain with the fluorescent lights. But the day my labs turned, the nurse printed the numbers and taped them to the window where the sun could hit them. My brother came every Tuesday after that with Tupperware and silence. He is paying support now without a court order. That's not karma you can screenshot, but it is the most expensive thing he's ever bought. The right to try again. Eli keeps the donor bracelet in his sock drawer next to a crayon drawing of the three of us holding hands. He drew my hair curly. Story 11. I'm a paramedic, which means I meet people on the worst day of their lives and then try to forget their names. Harder when the worst day belongs to your ex. He'd cheated on me twice and, as a parting gift, took out a store card in my name to buy camera gear for his prank channel. I spent months clawing my credit back while he filmed strangers for clout. We got a dispatch, rollover, one car, influencer crowd gathering. When we pulled up, there he was. Neck brace half fastened, mic pack clipped to his hoodie. His buddy filming from the median. He was yelling, "Get this, bro. This is Act 3, like Payne had a script. The SUV had a suspiciously clean crumple on the bumper, like someone had practiced with shopping carts. A bystander shook her head and said she'd seen him slam the brakes for a box in the road that wasn't there. We started the exam. Vitals normal. Pupils equal. Zero tenderness. He insisted he couldn't feel his legs, then stood up to adjust his good side for the camera. My partner raised an eyebrow. "Sir, you said you were paralyzed," he mumbled about shock. The state trooper arrived, and the bystander, bless her, held up her phone. His pre-crash Instagram story. Him rehearsing the emergency call, practicing a whimper. "Insurance content," he'd typed with a crying, laughing emoji. The trooper asked for the footage. His buddy refused. The crowd didn't. 3 people airdropped clips to the trooper. You could hear my ex say, "We'll find the box after we roll." The trooper found the empty Amazon carton, pristine, on the shoulder. "You staged a collision," he said. So calmly it sounded like a lullaby. The mic pack finally picked up something real, my ex's heartbeat, galloping. He tried to pivot to tears, then to yelling at me for poisoning strangers against him. I didn't have to speak. The insurance investigator, who'd just happened to be nearby on another case, stepped forward and introduced herself. She'd been trying to match a string of soft tissue claims to a channel that encouraged civilian stunt vlogging. His license went limp in her gloved hand. Charges came later: attempted insurance fraud, reckless endangerment. He DM'd me at 2 a.m. to say I'd won. I muted him. The quiet part of karma arrived 6 months after the court date, when our hospital piloted a community service program. Guess who showed up in an orange vest to fold discharge pamphlets? He looked past me like I was drywall. I handed him a stack labeled Credit Repair Resources. He paused, then read the top line out loud. Step 1. Stop filming other people's pain. For once, he didn't ask where the camera was. Story 12. I run the after-school theater program at a public middle school. Drama, but for kids who still believe the stage can fix a cracked world. One of my 7th graders, Maya, was our lead this year. Her dad, my ex, bailed on us when Maya was a toddler and came back only when there was a chance to take bows. He cheated on me, accused me of turning his daughter against him, then discovered TikTok and rebranded as a girl dad. He filmed himself reacting to her rehearsals without her permission. Opening night, the auditorium buzzed. He arrived late, ring light in hand, talking to his followers about supporting the arts. He tried to set up in the aisle. I asked him to move. He rolled his eyes and called me controlling on live. The kids filed backstage. I squeezed Maya's shoulder and told her to breathe. She smiled like someone who'd rehearsed breathing too. The show went beautifully until the end. When we do our tradition, the lead chooses one adult to bring on stage for a thank you. The kids joke it's like The Bachelor, but it's really a chance for a child to hand back the spotlight. Maya had never picked anyone. Every year she'd shrug and say the costume rack. This time she walked to the edge of the stage and said, "Can I change the rules?" I nodded. She called up her stepmom. The audience murmured. The woman who'd steadied bedtimes and taught Maya to braid, who'd sat through every rehearsal grading nursing school flashcards under our ghost light. Maya pulled out a folded paper. "We wrote a little," she said, handing it to me. I read into the mic at her request. "Thank you for showing up on the boring days." Her dad shoved past a row of grandparents, ring light blazing. "This is parental alienation," he shouted. A dozen phones rose like a flock. The principal approached him and asked him to step into the lobby. He kept yelling about rights. A boy in the second row, his son with the woman he cheated with, covered his ears. Backstage, Maya squeezed my hand. "We can do the curtain call without him," she whispered. We did. The applause felt like steady rain after a bad summer. In the lobby afterward, a handful of parents formed a quiet semicircle around the ring light, blocking his angles. He lowered it for the first time. A week later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. The judge assigned to their family court review watched the recording and admitted it as evidence of his behavior. "I'm sorry you needed an audience to be believed," the message read. Maya came to rehearsal the next day, humming off-key, and asked if we could build a set that looks like a kitchen. "So we can practice the boring days," she said. We painted cabinets the color of calm. Story 13. We were the kind of couple who sold at maker fairs. Her ceramics, my metalwork. Then I found my sketches watermarked with her new boyfriend's logo and listed as AI-assisted originals. She called it collaboration. I called my lawyer, who laughed and told me to keep receipts. The city announced a juried night market with grants for artisans who used recycled materials. I applied with a line of recycled steel lamps modeled after my dad's old fishing nets. She applied too, with eco-NFTs, which is like calling a smoke alarm a candle. Night of, the market was magic. Twinkle lights, buskers, fog rolling off the river. I'd welded my lamps to look like huge jellyfish. Kids dragged their parents over to stand under the glow. Across the aisle, she had a projector showing minting moments, each print uniquely generated from community inspiration. My notebooks, if you squinted. A woman in a blazer from the city's arts council came by with a clipboard and a question that sounded like a trap. "Can you show me your process?" I popped open my phone. Time-lapse videos of me cutting and bending steel. Voiceovers cursing when I burned my thumb. My dad in a cameo, telling me I'd finally learned to tack properly. The woman smiled. Then she asked my ex for hers. My ex launched a word salad. The boyfriend talked about models and training and the ineffable vibe of river towns. The woman held up a print and asked where the grid pattern in the background came from. I knew the answer. I'd drawn it in a notebook I'd kept under a floorboard at our old apartment. A habit from growing up with little brothers who thought everything was communal. A teen with purple hair wandered up, looked at the print and said, "Hey, that's from the zine you sold at the co-op." Page 9. The teen pulled out a crumpled copy from her tote. You could see my grid through the ink like ghost bones. The Arts Council rep took photos, slowly, like she was collecting shells. The grants were announced at the end of the night. They gave out 3. I got 1. A sculptor who makes whales from bike chains got 1. The third went to the teen with the zine. Turns out she screen prints shirts from thrifted fabric and teaches free workshops behind the community center when the weather's good. My ex didn't get a grant. She did get served. Right there, a civil notice stapled to a description of derivative work, with my screenshots attached. As I loaded the truck, the boyfriend approached to negotiate. I pointed at the jellyfish lamps glowing in the dark. "You can't mint the calluses," I said. He looked at his hands like they might bloom them if he stared hard enough. They didn't. Story 14. I translate for a law clinic that helps couples with immigration interviews. The terrifying kind where a stranger decides if your marriage is real. I took the job to pay rent. The universe took the opportunity to seat my ex across from me with the woman he left me for. He once told me my accent made me sound provincial. He adopted hers like a new coat. We sit in a small room with a two-way mirror. The officer asks easy questions first. Birthdays, favorite foods. Then she starts to peel the onion. Who sleeps on what side? Which neighbor has the loud dog? How many steps to the laundry room? I translate both directions, voice neutral, heart doing parkour. The answers start to wobble. He says their wedding was at the Botanical Garden in June. She says July at City Hall. He says she hates cilantro. She says it's her favorite, and he always picks it out in tacos. She squeezes his knee under the table. He flinches. The officer notes it all without blinking. Then the officer opens a folder. My ex had filed paperwork earlier in the year, with me listed as his spouse. He'd withdrawn it after we broke up, but the timestamps are cousins. Why did you list 2 addresses as your marital home within 1 quarter? The officer asks. He tries charm, then indignation, then silence. The woman he cheated with turns to me, eyes huge, and says in her language, "Is this bad?" I translate. The officer says, "It's not good." They separate them for the Stokes portion. 2 rooms, same questions, See who matches. I sit with her. She tells me she keeps the rent receipts because he always forgets. She pulls out a shoebox of small evidence. A grocery list with his handwriting. A photo strip from a booth at the mall where he's half smiling like a thief. She starts to cry. I hand her tissues from a box that says, "You're doing great." He returns first, sweaty. The officer brings her back, sighs, and says she'll review and issue a decision by mail. That's bureaucrat for, "This is probably denied." We pack up in silence. In the hallway, the woman lingers. "Did he do to you what he did to me?" she asks. "Worse," I say. And we both laugh, which feels like breathing through a cracked window. 2 months later, the clinic gets a notice. Petition denied for insufficient evidence of bona fide marriage, with a footnote about material misrepresentations. The woman comes back alone to ask about options that don't involve him. She's enrolled in a job program now and sending money home. He messages me on a new number. "You were cold." I reply, "I was accurate. Some stamps you can't scrub off. Not because the government says so, but because memory does." Story 15. I drive nights. It's quiet money and stranger radio. One Friday, I picked up a man in a suit that cost more than my car payment. He didn't give an address, just drive until I say stop. He smelled like the kind of cologne that apologizes in advance. Halfway across town, he asked if the camera was on. I told him yes, it records for both our safety. "Good," he said, like he wanted to leave a message. He started talking. At first I thought he was rehearsing a speech. Then I realized he was confessing to an audience of one, himself. He bragged about how he'd taught a lesson to his ex, ran up her cards, signed her email for a loan, moved money through a friend to make the trail look like an accounting error. He named the bank. He named the friend. He laughed. "People who love you never check the statements," he said. We hit a red light. On the corner, a late-night ATM blinked like a metronome. I looked at him in the mirror and said, "Some do." He smirked, asked if a woman had hurt me. I didn't answer. He took a call on speaker. It was the friend. Panicked, saying the bank had frozen his accounts because of abnormal activity and linked IP addresses. My passenger told him to lawyer up, then hung up and told me to turn left. I dropped him at a townhouse with a door that looked like new money. As he got out, he said, "If anyone asks, you never saw me." I tapped the dash cam. He waved. "You think that matters?" The door shut. The camera kept rolling even when the ride ended because that's how it's wired. Monday. A detective called. She'd pulled my plate from a traffic camera near a night deposit where a card skimmer was found. She asked if I'd been in that area Friday. I told her yes and asked if I could share something. I brought the SD card to the precinct. We watched his monologue over burnt coffee, the detective's pen stuttering across her pad when he said the bank name. A week later, I saw him again, but this time he called a different car. I watched from a gas pump as two unmarked sedans bracketed the curb and a plainclothes officer opened his door for him like a gentleman. He went into the back seat with his hands visible. My phone buzzed. An email from the bank thanking me for assisting an investigation and, surprise, confirming reversal of fraudulent charges on an account with my name. My ex had used the same friend, the same pattern, years back. The detective connected the dots I'd been too tired to try to draw. That night, I changed my route to pass one extra street, the block where my former apartment is. The new tenant had hung a string of fairy lights on the balcony. They looked like tiny verdicts winking in the dark. Story 16. I'm a fraud analyst at a regional bank. My desk is headphones, coffee, and people telling on themselves by accident. 2 years ago, an application hit my queue, a debt consolidation loan, with a co-signer's SSN. I recognized from an old case. I shouldn't recognize numbers, but I did, because my little sister had spent a year clawing her credit back after her ex opened a store card in her name for camera gear and emergencies. I flagged it, sent it to escalation, and waited to see which mask he'd wear this time. He called the hotline the next morning. We record calls for training and for evidence. He tried to rush the agent, talked about time-sensitive rate locks, and when she said we needed verbal consent from the co-signer, he said, "She's at work. I'll speak for her." We use voice print authentication. Most people don't even know we're building a map of their vowels. He deep sighed, then played an audio clip. My sister's voice said, "I authorize." The waveform looked wrong. Too clean. No room echo. Consonants clipped like scissor cuts. The system flashed orange. Potential synthetic. The agent, a saint, kept him busy with address verification, while I looped in our digital forensics guy. We asked him to visit a branch to finish the paperwork. He showed up in a suit that looked rented and told the teller she should skip steps for premium clients. I watched from the back with a manager. We asked to conference the co-signer. He dialed, put it on speaker, and a woman answered with my sister's name and a spelling mistake. The manager, trained for polite stubborn, said, "Hi, Can you tell me what we discussed yesterday? The line went dead. Then the door chimed. My sister walked in, cheeks flushed, holding a police report. She'd gotten a text about a loan she'd just co-signed. The ex tried to charm the room. "We're reconciling," he announced, loud enough for the cameras. My sister held up the forged authorization recording on his phone, found in his cloud because he never disables auto backup. Side by side, the tell was obvious. In the clip, she authorized the loan while a clock in the background read 3:26 a.m., the exact time she'd been on FaceTime with me crying about how he kept inventing emergencies. Security didn't cuff him. That's TV. But we froze the application, tagged his profile, and filed with the state AG. The charge that stuck wasn't romance. It was wire fraud. The funny part of quiet justice is the paperwork. So many tiny rectangles closing around a story. Weeks later, I processed a restitution credit into my sister's account with a note field that only bank employees see. I typed, "Reversal. Synthetic voice authentication attempt. Do not reopen." My sister bought a second-hand couch with the refund and sent me a picture of her cat vomiting on it. "Real life," she wrote. Unfaked. Story 17. I was a line cook under a golden retriever GM who turned out to be a raccoon in a people suit, my ex. He cheated with a vendor rep, wrote me up for negativity when I asked why payroll bounced, and posted LinkedIn sermons about family culture. The real culture was 12-hour shifts, broken aircon, and tips pooled into a jar that somehow never reached dish. When he cut my ex, our pastry chef and my actual girlfriend, down to 3 shifts for budget, we stopped whispering and called a union. The campaign lived in walk-ins and smoke breaks. We hid flyers in flower bins and scribbled dates on the underside of the expo shelf. He found out because bad bosses always do. Schedules got weird. Cameras multiplied. He told corporate we were outside agitators. Then he slipped. He texted the vendor rep from his work phone about crushing the vote and rotating out ringleaders. And IT had an auto-forward rule dumping everything with the word union to the office printer for the legal team. On a Tuesday lunch rush, the printer coughed out 30 pages of his messages onto the host stand like confetti. We filed an unfair labor practice charge that afternoon and kept flipping pans. A regional manager arrived with a smile that didn't move her eyes and said, "We should have a conversation." We did, at the NLRB office. The hearing room was disappointing. No gavels, just carpet. And perfect. Our server with 3 kids read out her docked paychecks. The dishwasher, who doesn't like talking, slid a photo across the table. A tip jar with an IOU in the GM's handwriting. My ex tried to do the small business under siege voice. The agent patted his stack of printouts until it made a little thunder. The vote was Friday in the dry storage, between racks of chickpeas and 10 cans of tomatoes. He wore a tie and stared at the floor like maybe the linoleum would rule for him. We won 22-3. On Monday, corporate sent a train the trainer about respecting protected activity and a separate email about leadership changes effective immediately. He cleaned out his office in a box that used to hold avocados and didn't say goodbye. The vendor rep stopped coming by. Her company got dropped for performance. Negotiations are still messy. But the first contract gave Dish a raise big enough to cancel a second job, and my girlfriend got her hours back and then some. The night the agreement was signed, someone taped a printout above the expo line. It was one of the auto-forwarded texts we'd submitted. Family culture doesn't need a contract. Underneath, someone scrawled in Sharpie, "Real families write it down." I plated a steak frites and sent it out hot, for once without the taste of rust in my mouth. Story 18. My ex was an assistant professor who treated other people's ideas like sample platters. He'd cheated. He'd also borrowed paragraphs from my thesis and reused them in grant proposals with the find-replace tool like a magic wand. I let it go because graduating felt like outrunning a fire. He landed a keynote at a niche conference the following spring. New approaches to river memory. Cute, considering his brain was a sieve. I went to support a friend on a panel, and because the conference was at our old university, the auditorium still smelled like dust and ambition. He took the stage in a jacket with elbow patches he hadn't earned and clicked to a slide that looked familiar. Too familiar. In the corner, a figure I'd drawn in graphite and scanned at 2 a.m. years ago. A stylized flow diagram with a tiny nick in the arrow where my pen had blotted. There was the nick. He'd lifted not the idea but the version with my mistake. During Q&A, a senior scholar, my friend's mentor, a woman who can gut a weak argument with one eyebrow, asked for his data availability statement. He smiled and said the files were in transit. She asked for his code repository link. He said, forthcoming. She asked if he could open the model right now. The auditorium had Wi-Fi. He clicked, fumbled, and pulled up a GitHub with a README. he'd clearly written on the plane. The commit history showed 3 pushes, all that morning. In the Issues tab, my username was tagged from 2 years ago, pointing out a bug in the exact function he was now presenting as his own. The eyebrow went up. Then my friend stood and, in the softest voice, asked, "Can you explain the provenance of figure 3? He launched into a word cloud. I opened my email and sent the moderator a PDF of my thesis with the figure on page 47, timestamped, and an image diff I'd made when I first noticed his reuse in a grant doc. The shapes stacked perfectly. My blot nicked the same place. The moderator, to his credit, didn't drag it out. He put both images up side by side. The room made that "oh" sound scholars make when footnotes turn into knives. The conference chair announced a recess. He left the stage without looking at me. 2 months later, the journal withdrew consideration of his paper. The university started an investigation. I got an email from a dean I didn't know asking to meet. I thought they wanted to smooth it over. Instead, they offered me an adjunct line to teach the very seminar he'd proposed, with my syllabus and my name on it, properly spelled. It's not tenure. It's better. 3 hours a week in a room where students say, "Wait, who gets to own an idea?" And I say, "Let's write down the rules so no one gets to pretend they're fog." Story 19. I'm the super in a 4-story walk-up with radiators that sing and mailboxes that stick. My tenant, call her Lena, lived in 3B with plants named after planets and a boyfriend who thought landlord meant he could cosplay one. He was on the lease as an occupant, not an owner. When they split, his cheating, her spine, he decided to be petty. Changed the lock while she was at work, tossed her shoes in a contractor bag, and texted her, "New management." She called me from the hallway, crying, holding a wilting pothos. I brought the drill and the codebook. In our city, illegal lockouts are a line in the sand. You don't cross it unless you want the city to live in your calendar. I called 311 and reported an immediate illegal eviction. An inspector arrived faster than a pizza. He took photos of the fresh deadbolt, the bag of shoes, the boyfriend's smug face, and the text. "Good news," the inspector said. "You're going to learn a lot about housing law today." We drilled the lock, reinstalled the original cylinder, and posted a bright orange notice on the door. "Restore possession." The boyfriend huffed that the lease was in his heart. The inspector pointed to the name printed under tenant. "The law can't read your heart," he said. The boyfriend threatened to sue. The inspector handed him a pamphlet titled, "How Not to Go to Jail." Within a week, Housing Court issued an order restoring Lena and scheduled a hearing. The boyfriend didn't bother to show. The judge granted her treble damages for the days locked out, plus a civil penalty, plus an order for him to pay for a locksmith of her choosing to swap every cylinder in the unit. He texted me asking if I knew a cheap guy. I sent him the court order instead. Best part wasn't the money. It was the day we changed the locks for real. Legally, with Lena home. She held the door while I screwed in the strike plate and asked if I could make one extra key for Saturn. Saturn is the kitchen fern. The boyfriend moved into a basement sublet up the block with a bathroom ceiling that weeps. Weeks later, I saw him on the stoop pretending to check his mail. Lena stepped past him carrying a bag of soil and didn't break stride. He said, "We could talk," and she said, "You could pay," and kept walking. At renewal time, the owner offered Lena a modest rent-stabilized increase and a thank you for not burning the place down. She left a note on my door with a plant clipping and a line that made me grin into my coffee. "The building chooses who it keeps." I stuck the clipping in a jar. It rooted. Story 20. I'm a gate agent. I don't play God. I play Tetris with weather, human emotion, and 180 carry-ons. One afternoon, a man in designer leisure wear strutted up with a first-class ticket booked on miles. He wanted to board early to settle his aura. Name popped up with an internal flag. Compromised account, hold for ID and additional verification. He rolled his eyes when I asked for a second form. "My assistant booked it," he said. "Assistants don't hack accounts. X's do." A woman approached the counter with a calm I recognized. The post-storm kind. "Hi," she said. "I'm the account holder for those miles." She handed me a police report, a divorce decree, and a stack of screenshots. He'd logged into her frequent flyer profile the night before from an IP address we could see on our end, spent down the miles on an upgrade for Mr. Aura, and changed her security question to our first date spot. He'd answered with the name of a bar they'd never been to. He'd taken someone else there. Our airline has a process for this. It's boring until it's poetry. Fraud team reversed the redemption while I smiled neutrally. His ticket downgraded in real time from 2A to C agent. He noticed. "There must be a mistake," he said. "I'm medallion." The system offered him main cabin, middle seat, last row. He refused loudly. The calm woman didn't gloat. She asked if there was a note she could put on her account to require a phone PIN for mileage use. There was. We set it up. She picked a number that made her laugh. He tried one more angle. He pulled out a laminated card from a budget lounge and waved it like a badge. A kid at the back of the line whispered, "Is he famous?" I said. "He is to himself." He demanded we honor the original booking. I pointed to the police report and the terms. Unauthorized access voids travel. He said he'd sue. I said I'd print him a receipt. Boarding started. She scanned first, upgrade reissued, 2A restored. He called her vindictive as she walked down the jet bridge. She turned and said softly, "You taught me the rules. I read them." He ended up buying a last-minute ticket on a later flight at walk-up rates. At pushback, I looked down the jet bridge and saw the woman's reflection in the porthole. She tapped something into her phone. A gate message popped on my screen. "Thanks for treating policy like a life raft." 2 weeks later, a box arrived at the station with a card. For the break room. Inside was a bag of fancy coffee and a tiny metal airplane with PIN protected engraved on the wing. I kept the spare stir sticks. He later tried to complain to corporate about unfair treatment. Corporate forwarded it to fraud. I hear he's back in 31E middle, learning the humility of the non-recline.